New Spring by Robert Jordan, Chapter 3. If you haven't read it, you need to, and then come back and hit play. We're going to talk about it right now. Okay, so we're drifting into Chapter 3, and this is starting to get interesting because he's now starting to meld the two stories that were going on in the first two chapters. We're finding out that the battle between Lan and his group and the AL is happening outside of the actual tower, and now we're going to get to see a little bit of how the tower thinks they're going to interact with that situation. This is a very, very interesting situation because there's this conflict and this paradox for how they are viewing this prophecy that's coming about, right? So I'm going to read a section of this here for you. So it says here, for more than 3,000 years, the world had waited on the prophecies of the dragon to be fulfilled, fearing them, yet knowing they told of the world's only hope. So in terms of prophecies, I find that to be almost unique because it seems like most prophecies, if you think back to fantasy universe and to lore, tend to talk about a triumphant, winning, saving grace showing up. But this particular one doesn't seem to talk about a guarantee that the promised savior, that this dragon reborn, was actually going to win. It was that there was this dire situation and they were just really, really hoping that they would win. I find that really, really conflicting there. How they're fearing this horrible situation, but knowing this horrible situation is the only way for the Dragon Reborn to show themselves and to potentially save them from everything, but that there was a lot of risk involved. If you've got another example of it from another fantasy series that you've read that talks about something like that, that would be kind of interesting to me to hear as well. And the other paradox that comes through that is right next to a couple pages from this really dark, foreboding prophecy that Robert Jordan was talking about with the Dragon Reborn, you have this really lighthearted background of Suin and Moraine pulling pranks on each other, and pulling pranks on the other Accepted and the other Novice, and how they got away with some of the things based on tower culture, and some things were considered a little more foreboding. But I thought back to when I was in college and one of the times that I got in a prank war with some guys, but I managed to get on both sides, and it was really interesting because neither of them knew that I was involved for at least the beginning, and I got to be part of 5 or 6 levels of escalation back and forth between these different groups of guys until someone realized that I was part of it, and then they all got me. I always thought that was a really, really fun thing. I was really hoping that I had managed to sneak out of it. I always thought the best part of a prank was not the actual prank itself. Certainly they should be funny, they shouldn't be damaging, you shouldn't hurt somebody, it should be with someone you care about so you're not trying to bully them or anything. But what I find best about a prank is when you're able to keep it a secret. When you can then sit back days, weeks, months later and just watch them have no idea where it came from. I never liked showing up to take credit for the prank. I liked it to be a mystery so that I could enjoy it and watch the confusion and the accusations kind of burn and watch them try to figure out who did it to them and never tell them. I am really interested to hear what your favorite pranks were, things that were done to you that you thought were hilarious but you never figured out who did it, times that you got caught trying to pull a prank you thought you were going to get away. I just think that would be a really interesting story. So if you want to share that below, go ahead and do that. The other paradox that I think really comes out of this chapter is one that I almost missed. So they're talking about how Moraine and Suin have to be careful because there are these children of the light that would not hesitate to hurt someone from the tower, and it's clearly kind of foreshadowed as this really deadly conflict and rivalry that they have with this children of the light. But then I started thinking back to, I believe it was chapter 2, where they're talking about how the Amerlin seat was so important and was listing all of these rulers and leaders that would pay attention to the Amerlin seat. I feel like there's almost kind of a correlation there between how the Pope just has a certain amount of influence, right? But they talked about one of the people that would sit down with the Amerlin seat and pay attention politely would be the commander of the Children of the Light. And then a chapter later, he's talking about how a Children of the Light member would be more than willing to kill off one of the Aes Sedai or the Accepted or the Novices. And I'm really interested to kind of see how that develops because there's this weird maybe respect for power thing, even though they are clearly rivals at some level. And I'm really just interested in your thoughts on that as well. I don't know if any of you saw that, but how do you think that plays out? Have you ever been in a situation where you really, really thought that you were at odds with someone, but based off the power dynamics around you, you totally had to play it completely nice and you couldn't address it maybe in the way that you wanted? Or have you seen that in this story as well? What are your thoughts with what's coming with that? We're going to go to chapter 4 next week. Please go ahead and read that, and then you can hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button if you want to catch up on that. I'm going to start adding some other topics to the channel about how to find books for kids, how to increase literacy with your children, things of that sort of stuff. Some other books that I've read that aren't just this series, and so maybe that'll be an interesting side step for you. But get into chapter 4. It's going to be good. I'll see you.